Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Today we're going to talk about one of my real passions, Star Trek. Now especially the original series. And really everything that comes before the movies. Now that's not to say I don't love the movies. I do. In fact, having rewatched them recently, I found that over time I've actually learned to love them even more. The motion picture, I've got a whole much more appreciation for now than when I was younger. And some of the other Star Treks that were, not as well regarded once upon a time. I found a lot to love in them. But what I want to specifically talk about today is a little piece of, Trek history, I guess we could call it. The wardrobe designer Robert Fletcher's personal notes for Star Trek 1, 2, and 3, division's rank insignia. Okay. So, as we all know, Star Trek, well, maybe we don't all know. I think as most of us know. The uniforms for the original Star Trek were designed by William Ware Theiss. And they're probably among the best TV costume design there ever was. They have achieved sort of a legendary status, the different colors for the different departments, etc. And I think they're kind of genius for a couple of reasons. In universe, for a pseudo-military or paramilitary organization, 200 years into the future, they make quite a bit of sense. Other than the boots, and I've worn boots similar to this, and they're not very comfortable if you're on your feet all day. But other than the boots, you have relatively simple trousers, you have a tunic, there would have been an undershirt. It looks like it would be relatively comfortable to work in. But it still has an air of military, military efficiency, of rank, of command. We have the rank stripes on the sleeve, which I think really work really well. The insignia. It definitely gives the look of an organization, but, but futuristic, not something we would expect nowadays. But it doesn't look overly military, because that wasn't what Roddenberry was going for. So in universe, I think the uniforms work very well and they make a lot of sense. Now, in terms of them being costumes for a television show, I think they also work really well. Again, relatively comfortable for the actors to work in. Maybe I don't know about the mini dresses. From what I understand, as much as, Roddenberry and them get blamed for the short skirts. I've heard also, though, that some of the idea from that came from some of the women who starred on the show, who were dancers, who wanted to show their legs off. The 60s, the mini skirt was sort of a power move for women. It was meant to sort of make uncomfortable, stodgy old men who, thought women should cover themselves up. Now, over time, I think a lot of women realized that even the stodgy old men weren't really that bothered by the miniskirt. They kind of liked looking at their legs, and then it was like, well, if they don't like it, then we're not going to do it. Or if they do like it, we're not going to do it. So I don't know how comfortable those were, but I think these uniforms for the men seem like they're pretty comfortable in terms of, for the actors. The bright colors were perfect for that moment in time on television, where color is becoming a big deal. And so you get these very brightly colored TV shows like this, like Batman, Wild Wild West. Think of the costume that Jim West wears. Bright colors were a way to sell color television sets and to sell the public on color. And a way probably to, compete somewhat with Technicolor, movies and such. So it made sense in that regard too. So these are great uniforms. Now, these Mego figures, like the one I'm holding, they were sold well after the TV show had ended and gone into syndication, even beyond the run of the animated series. They were still selling these, I think, right up to the point where the motion picture was going to be produced. And then I believe they lost their license because they wanted to focus on motion picture related merchandise. So these were the Star Trek uniform from the late 60s all the way almost, to the 80s. Real close. This was it. And they might have remained the only Star Trek uniform. Because obviously the motion picture was originally going to be a television series. It was going to be Star Trek Phase 2. They were bringing back most of the cast. Nimoy didn't want to do it, although he said maybe he'd do some guest appearances. But they were going to bring back most of the cast, and it was going to become the flagship show of a Paramount TV network. And from the looks of it, they were going to continue with these uniforms for Phase 2. They weren't going to design something new. Obviously, they needed to save money where they could. They were working on a slightly updated look for the Enterprise and for the sets, but it was still going to be these uniforms. And if that show had actually aired, I don't know that we ever would have gotten different uniforms. If the show had aired and had failed miserably, that was probably it for Star Trek. It's not going to be turned into motion pictures if it's failed for its second time on TV. You're not going to get a Star Trek The Next Generation, possibly. It would have really hurt the brand. And if it had succeeded, they probably wouldn't have felt the need to redesign the uniforms. Or if they had, it would have been probably a much less severe redesign than what we got for the motion picture. But of course, we did get the motion picture. And because it was going to be on the big screen, they needed to redesign the uniforms and a lot of other things so they would look better on a big screen than the small screen. And so we get a pretty radical redesign of the uniforms for the motion picture. And I think most folks out there are relatively aware of them. They kind of had the look of pajamas, if we're honest. Which I think you could actually find also in Space 1999. That was clearly sort of the design motif that was floating around at the time. They had more neutral colors. They actually had a lot more colors in terms of colors for the different departments and things of that nature than the original series, which had the 3 colors. They had jumpsuits and a few different varieties of the other costumes. And they were not popular. And I don't know that they were that popular, at least the jumpsuits, with the actors who had to wear them. Jumpsuits, fine if you're wearing it as a flight suit in the Air Force or what have you. But outside, you gotta strip the whole thing off just about if you need to use the restroom. There's some issues with jumpsuits. And so the motion picture didn't exactly flop, but it didn't do that well. A lot of people found it boring, etc. It's a very Star Trek movie. It hits the kind of themes that the Star Trek TV series hit, far more so than the later films, which are more popular. But it didn't do that great with the audiences. But from what I hear, somebody close to the head of Paramount, it was maybe like a girlfriend, fiance, wife, I'm not sure, was a huge Star Trek fan and said, you got to try again, you got to try it again. So they end up developing Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And they decide that we're going to redo the uniforms. Now, this is Hollywood. So they need to save money whenever they can on a budget. The jumpsuits that you see in the later Star Trek films were, in fact, the jumpsuits that you saw in Star Trek The Motion Picture. And then maybe they had to make a few extras, I don't know. But in general, they decided they needed to re-dye them, though. They didn't want them to look the same. And add some other features. And that's where the maroon color, the monster maroons, as they're often called, that's where that maroon color comes from. There were, I think, 3 options. I think maroon is one of them, obviously. Navy blue was another. I can't remember what the third one was that they could use, that they could dye over the old ones that would look good. And they ultimately went for the maroon. So let's get into, move Kirk at his different stages of life out of the way here. So let's look at this piece. Now this is Star Trek before there was an internet. This is when you bought these things at conventions. This is real fan Trek. I got this one online. It was quite affordable. So let's look at Fletcher's notes for his new designs. So first we have Star Trek Federation Starfleet insignia and ranks, divisions. Okay, so again they went for breaking things down a little bit more than the 3 main colors from the TV series. Command in white, engineering yellow ochre, science gray. And we get, command includes both line and staff officers and all personnel, both enlisted and commissioned of the following corps. Now, initially, Roddenberry's attitude was there were no enlisted ranks in Starfleet. Everybody's an officer because everybody had to have advanced education. That might have broken down over the course of the TV series a bit. And later on, they definitely said, no, there's enlisted people. You don't need to have command officers working janitorial, So engineering, same for all division. Oh, the emblem is the same for all divisions, only the background colors change. Okay, engineering division is made up of the following corps. Transportation, maintenance, repair, operation, or repair and operation. Science division includes navigation, and these are all continued to the next page. And we find all the other things that are in command, in engineering, in science. But then we also get medical, light green, security, Windsor green, special services, sky blue. To me, you're already, apparently there's no color blindness in the future either. Because look, I'm colorblind, and I can tell the difference between the different uniforms on the original series. Cadet trainees wear flame red. And you'll definitely see that on Savik if you're watching the movie. And so this would be the little badge, and it doesn't show up very well on this Mego Kirk, Admiral Kirk, Admiral. But what we're getting to next. So armbands and shoulder straps. So we have the armbands. Make sure I'm getting this. So we have armbands down here. We have the shoulder strap up here. The bands on the left sleeves of both enlisted and commissioned personnel match the division color to which he or she is assigned. So white, that's command, right? This is also true of the commissioned officer's shoulder strap and the shoulder tabs on the enlisted jumpsuits and the engineering protective suits. Shirts, collars, and cuffs. The shirts with trapunto collars and cuffs worn by the commissioned personnel also match his or her division color. So, this is important. Underneath this jacket, there is essentially kind of a sweater, like a turtleneck sweater. Cue the SpongeBob music here. And you would have the cuffs down here as well, though you don't see them on this particular action figure. And those also match the division color. Exceptions. Cadet trainee sleeve and shoulder bands bear imposed slashes the color of the divisions to which the enrollee will be assigned. So you could see right away here, they're putting a lot into this. A lot into this. Or I say they. Fletcher's putting a lot into this. We see commissioned personnel sleeve bands and shoulder straps with dimensions. Awesome, obviously, if you're recreating these uniforms for a convention. And there's the enlisted sleeve band. And there are other exceptions as well. Security clearance device. The shoulder strap closing the tunic of commissioned personnel terminates on the back of the right shoulder in a round silver-colored electronic security clearance device which allows its wearer free access. And you can maybe make that out. It's not really obvious on the toy there. You have a pant stripe. Now that's supposed to be in the color of the division, okay? Up to the rank of Commodore. Commodore to rank of Admiral wear a 1-inch wide tunic red stripe with a narrow gold soutache in middle, set on a 2 1/4 band wide black shelf band. Okay, well, this is Mego. They're not going to get that complicated, so we have the red stripe on the pants for the fact that he's an admiral. Okay, and then the ranks. Now, on the original series, the rank is found on the sleeve, very Navy, and very easy from a distance, both in universe, if you are, serving on board the Enterprise, but also for all of us viewers at home to figure out who's got the higher rank. In fact, a lot of military people could probably more or less figure it out too, without knowing, the details. The ranks here used a metal pin that is up on this shoulder strap. And you get an idea of what these rank insignia look like. Commodore has these 3 kind of crescent shapes. Rear Admiral, you have 4 of those crescent shapes with 1 bar. Vice Admiral, and I guess this is maybe not even, I don't know if that's in metal or not, but Vice Admiral gets the 2 bars, Admiral 3, Rear Admiral, Fleet Admiral gets 4. Breast insignia. For officers, you get the more complicated looking one. Don't know if we can, no, that's not too bad in terms of, it focused okay. So you can see, more or less matches this with the kit's bronze, with taupe, and gold. Starfleet insignia, actual size for enlisted. It's just the insignia with the circle. Now, there's, if you're into Star Trek, you'll know that there's some controversy over that insignia. It was originally intended to be the insignia for Starfleet. And everybody was going to have it on the breast of the uniform, like the one here, which you can see is a sticker that's a little curled at this point. But Theiss didn't apparently know that was the intention. And so when a different starship came up, he decided to put a different insignia on those uniforms. And so that kind of became official, that each of these different ships has its own emblem. When they go back to do the motion picture and such, they decide we're just going to have the one emblem for everybody. And so in universe, they decide, well, it's to honor the Enterprise, which was maybe the only Constitution class or Starship class vessel that made it through its entire 5-year mission. Of course, it had already been in service before the 5 years, if you're counting Pike, whatever. Anyways, but that was the intention, was to have that be the Starfleet emblem, and it was based somewhat loosely on, it wouldn't have been the Space Corps back then, but whichever under division of, the Air Force and such was handling rocketry and things of that nature. that was a more severe triangle. They use that for the space for the Space Force now, and some people said, "Oh, they copied Star Trek." Well, no, they really didn't. So here we get the rank emblems for those who for all the ranks. So these are metal pins. Able seaman. Why would they would use the term seaman? I don't know. Petty officer second class, petty officer first class, chief petty officer. So you can see the way it builds up. Senior chief petty officer, master chief petty officer. Shown actual size, all dark silver except Ware. Noted. And these aren't too bad. They work. I think the problem though is if you're serving on board ship, can you make that rank emblem out from far away? Because I think based on the shapes, you could get these confused. See, if you look at a lot of navies and other militaries outside of the United States, they tend to use a scheme where you'll have, for the given rank levels, you'll have a particular emblem, a shape, and you start with 1, and then you get 2, and then you get 3. Think a little bit of like the pips that they used on the collars in Star Trek The Next Generation. And then they go to a different emblem, and 1, 2, and 3, etc. Okay. So you could pretty easily count the pips, so to speak, and kind of get an idea of what somebody's rank is based on the metal, etc. Now the U.S., of course, always evolves along different lines than the rest of the world, which, yes, I know, it just drives the rest of the world up a wall, but that's how we like it in America. And there you actually develop different emblems. So we have the gold bar and the silver bar for lieutenants, 2 bars for a captain, and then we got the gold, I guess it's kind of an oak leaf for major, the silver one for lieutenant colonel, the bird for the colonel, and then we go to the stars for the generals. And the stars for generals work a lot like a lot of other rank emblems do in other countries. Of course, same for the Navy, but the rank names are different, but they're the same levels. And because those are such a different shape, they're not that hard to discern. I don't know about some of these. I don't think the shapes are different enough. So then we go to ensign, has that little sort of a triangle. Lieutenant junior grade, these 2 little emblems, they're linked together for a lieutenant. Yeah, tell the difference between those from far away. Commander, now you got this thing around it with 2 bars, but that makes it harder to see the bars. Captain, but you add a little gold on the edges. Commodore, you got a gold and like a silver thing and blah, blah, blah. And then you get a bigger cluster as you go up in the ranks. That's the one thing that I don't really care for much in terms of these uniforms. I think they would have been much better off maintaining the stripes on the sleeve rather than using those emblems. That's just me. I'm sure others would disagree. You also, on the sleeve, you can see he's got these little slashes and circles, right? And the circles represent 5 years of service, and the longer ones are Starfleet commendations. Whoops. Well, if I could get a hold of that page, I'll be doing okay. And then we have some miscellaneous badges and such like that. The prison guards, their cap device, the breast insignia, which is even slightly different than the others. Sol System Earth Base shoulder patch. Okay, you get the idea. And then we get the fabrics, commissioned personnel, shirts, lightweight spandex and or rayon jersey, tunic, wool, elastique faced with lightweight wool gabardine, white for command, beige for others, black rayon lining, trousers, wool, elastique or lightweight wool worsted, fastenings of tunic, snaps covered with black silk joined with sterling silver chain. Flag ranks have narrow gold, blah, 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 blah. You can see Gets all into it. Again, great if you're doing cosplay. Okay. So that's this neat little guide to these uniforms. So, I already talked about why I think this is a pretty ingenious uniform, both for how it works in universe and also how it works, just for viewers as a costume. Now, the Monster Maroons look fantastic on film, without a doubt. They were going for a more military look, and they got it with these. And you could argue, well, that's not really what Starfleet was supposed to be. Fine, but that's what they make it in these movies. Think of it as its own little universe in a way. And in that regard, they work very nicely. And they look really good. They were also helpful because the actors were getting a little older, and some were getting a little thicker in the middle, and these things helped cover that up pretty effectively. So they're stunning. They look great. You got maybe more colors than you need for the divisions, but not to the point that they become distracting. And in fact, I think when I was watching it as a kid, as a teenager, I'm not even sure if I noticed that, to be honest, that they had different colors, because my eyes were so drawn to the maroon. You still got the black pants. You got boots, which are probably still uncomfortable, but that's fine. Goes all the way down. You don't have it sort of these short pants. I always thought, as a kid, that their pants were tucked into the boots. It got much older before I realized it was the pants are actually just short. Which I think I remember James Doohan kind of making fun of that. I won't use what he said about it. I won't say what he said about him, but he was making fun of him a bit. So these things look great. In universe, like I said, I think there's some problems. I think the rank is a little too confusing. It would have been better on the sleeve. Because things like that, you want to have people recognize right away. You need somebody to recognize that you're in command if you walk into a certain area and there's maybe a crisis. And people shouldn't be like, oh, can I see your shoulder? Oh, okay. Oh, that's captain. Okay, you're a captain. I need to obey you. It should be pretty obvious right away. But the other issue I have, again, outside of the boots and pants, which are more or less like these things look so uncomfortable for just day-to-day, being a crew on the ship. I think they look fantastic as dress uniforms. And, you could argue in Wrath of Khan that they should be dress uniforms, right? It's an admiral is coming on board for this shakedown sort of crew, or cruise with a new crew. Everybody's going to be, in their sort of best-looking uniforms, at least the officers for sure. And that's why they're wearing these things that look a little bit on the bulky side. It's a thin wool, but I don't know. They always look kind of like they'd be hot as heck to wear and probably not that comfortable to be working in, for an 8-hour shift. But of course, and you do see this in Wrath of Khan when they're down on the planet. And of course, we have the little flap, which does absolutely nothing, but it looks great. But it's kind of silly otherwise. And of course, you can't take this off, but there's a scene when they're down on the planet where they were testing the Genesis device, and they're in that cavern. And Kirk takes off the jacket, and underneath it you have essentially this sort of lightweight collared sweater or shirt, which really doesn't look that different from what they were wearing in the pilot episodes, both of them. And I think if you just had your crew in those on a normal basis, they looked like they'd be pretty comfortable to work in. Maybe not even that different from what you often saw in submarine movies with what people would be wearing, especially like the German U-boat ones, so they always have those sweaters. So I think those actually make sense. I think if you treat this as a dress uniform, it makes a lot more sense than as a duty uniform. And if you had those shirt sweater things, using the colors that they chose for the movies would be fine. I think if you wanted a muted sort of color, though, you could have actually used the colors from the pilots, which were sort of much more muted than the bright colors they ultimately went with, which, again, those bright colors made a lot of sense because of color TV being brand new. But if you use those muted shades with the maroon, they probably look pretty good. And I think that would make much more sense on like your day-to-day Dooney uniform in this, even more futuristic version of Star Trek. So, personally, I rank Theiss's uniform design higher than Fletcher's in terms of real-world use. But I think in terms of costume design, I mean, they're both absolute winners. They're both stunners. They look great. They're beloved by fans. I would be happy to wear either one of them if I wasn't a middle-aged, fat guy going to a convention. I wouldn't probably look that good in either of them personally, but they look awesome, and you'd feel awesome wearing them. So there you go. The uniforms of Starfleet, brought to us by Mego and by wardrobe designer Robert Fletcher's personal notes. You could probably find copies of this on eBay, etc. if you want to dig into it. I have a few more things like this I'm going to show off in the coming year or years, because I think, fans really did build this franchise more so than probably any other franchise that's floating around out there. They put so much investment into it, and in writing things and compiling things and inventing ideas, some of which kind of got adopted over time into the series. They're a really great time capsule to look at, both in terms of sci-fi and in Star Trek, and also just in being a very active fandom. And all the issues that you see in fandom, with people arguing and being nasty to each other, you see in the old fanzines. So when people say, well, the problem is the internet, the problem is not the internet. People were doing this analog a long time ago when it came to fandom. Cliques would develop and arguments would be created and egos would get involved and people would sometimes be kind of nasty. The internet makes it a lot easier, but it was there from the get-go. So, folks, I think that'll do it for this particular episode of Dad's Den. If you enjoyed it, please maybe give a like, maybe subscribe, maybe think about sharing with a friend. I would really appreciate that. Anything that helps this little silly channel of mine grow, where we talk about all sorts of pop culture, primarily from, the 1930s into the 2000s, but probably mostly we're hitting stuff in the 80s and 70s and maybe 50s and 60s. That's kind of where a lot of my growing up was done. Well, not the 60s, but anyways. So if you like it, though, give it a like. That really helps out. And it doesn't really take that much effort just to hit that little thumbs up button. But if you don't want to, that's fine too. I understand. I am not everybody's cup of tea. In the meantime, though, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. And try to have some fun in your life, because you only get one go-around. At least, we won't get into religion here. We'll just say you only have one life to live, and leave it at that. And I will see you again next time on Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.